Good morning, Upper Sixth. Here we are, bullet point 7. Entrepreneurs and UK clothing retailers. This worries me. So I thought we'll do one video on entrepreneurs in mainly retail, expanding international markets, stuff like that, so we can cover that off. And then the second video will focus a bit more on a manufacturer. I think this is clothing retailers, but that word "and" makes me concerned because it could be entrepreneurs in any part of the sector. So I think we should cover a bit of both, really. Now, even though this video is going to focus on Gymshark, which is a fashion athletic wear type thing. I'm not sure we're going to get one on sports. However, think about when the examiners are, they want to be in rapport. They don't want to give you too many unfamiliar case studies. And I think Gymshark is a relatively new but sort of well-known brand. We've had sports and fitness industry in a previous research theme, so maybe they won't cover it, not sure, but it's a nice brand, it's a lovely story, and the article that I've taken from yesterday's Times covers all three of these units. Okay, so it's quite important for us to understand that. So first of all, go and get a Times subscription. It's $9.99 a year. And if not, I've put up a version of the article for you, so you can pause the video in a second and you can watch it, or preferably go and use the link down the bottom. So really interesting. So Ben Francis was one of the founders, but he's the one that's in the press all the time. He's the one that came up with the idea, and then other people worked with him. So it's quite important that with an entrepreneurial type exam question, you don't just look at Ben, you think about those complementary skills that he might need around him. We're normally looking for a bit of a backstory. So if they mention a one-liner about Ben, and I'll give you an example of that in another slide, it's really important that you look at that and you think, okay, well, what skills has he got? What skills would he need? Now, as the business is evolving and growing, and this one's growing internationally, what skills might he not have? How can he cope with that? Well, bring in experts, bring in people that can help him. And if you go on to Gymshark's company house records, which is where I've downloaded their accounts this morning, you'll see how many times they've changed their directors, for example. I would hope that in the early days, it was Ben and a couple of mates, maybe one of his investors. And then as the business grew, those directors had the skills that maybe Ben doesn't have. International retailing, for example, because he came straight out of university. So those sorts of things are quite important. Also, if you see a bit of text below a data extract, we'll just pretend this is the data extract, it's really important that you read it and think about it in context. Well, we're thinking about entrepreneurialism today, so we are looking for something to do with entrepreneurialism in this one sentence. He is confident, self-confidence. He believes in his own vision. He believes in the company. He's not just hit a little bit of a blip, profits slump. Yeah, he's saying, hang on, things are going to get better. Don't worry about it. We're evolving. This is a complex international business now. Things will improve. Yeah, so it's quite important that you look out for that. And don't just say he was confident. Just interpret that to do with lots of things. He's confident because improve its performance. Performance is probably referring to profits. Well, what type of profits? Well, in the case study, when you read it, you'll see that there is a dip in gross profits. Well, gross profits, that could be linked to competition in the marketplace, competition with athletic wear in the market segment they're in. Maybe Gymshark have had to discount some of their items, therefore lowering their their gross profit. If we look at their operating profit, however, it has been going up over the years, but they've made a loss last year. Now, is that because of other things, including the gross profit? Well, that's the sort of thing that you would have to think about if this was a finance question. but we're going to focus on entrepreneurialism, even though we will mention the numbers. There's lots of numbers in here. I've not edited this back. It is what it is. I'm sure if it was in an exam paper, it would be a lot shorter. And, we can see that there is lots of information here. Ben's still only 31, which is very young, even though you might think it's old. Nice quotes, tough trading conditions, lots of information. You can read the article. Pause the video, read the article. Then we can explore it in context with those 3 entrepreneurialism units. Did you pause it? Don't think so. Anyway, so we've got the 3 units there. Let's talk a bit about the finances, just so you've got a bit of a history. So 2015, I've looked at the accounts. As you'll know, if you've looked at any accounts in class, that normally your accounts will show 2 years worth of performance. You don't have to look at all of these accounts. You can skip a year and go, and do every other year, because you'll see two years worth of accounts. What you won't see if you only look at accounts once every 2 years is the commentary. And it's interesting to see there's quite a lot of commentary explaining the figures from the accountants. And that would have obviously been information from Ben and his team interpreted by the accountants to talk about things. If this was a PLC, then we would be seeing a lot more detail for lots of obvious reasons. However, Ben and his team are still trying to build the brand, get more investors maybe. Maybe that's why there's quite a bit of commentary in the accounts. I don't know. If it was a PLC, we would be seeing something a lot more glossy, trying to reinforce the message that the brand is there and bear with us currently because we're growing. Yeah? Wait for profits for the future. So 2014, 2015, this company was small enough for it not to have to declare full accounts. However, looking at their basic accounts, they had nearly £1 million worth of stock in 2015. They were clearly getting ready for something. So if you look at their fixed assets, for example, there's not a lot there at all, but there is a lot of stock. Okay, very risky. Banking on the future, confidence. So just seeing that much stock on the balance sheet is a form of entrepreneurialism. It's one of those characteristics that we would look for. Then we've got the sales revenue. And again, I know this isn't a finance unit, but look at the top, look at how they're labeling it. It says 3 zeros there, which means for these figures to be meaningful, you need to understand we're not talking about 12,785 quid. We're talking about 12,785,000 quid. Okay, so when we go down here, actually we can see that there is, I need to get a new mouse. We can see that this is fast approaching £500 million worth of revenue. So we need to think about sales forecasting, reasons to stay small, or in this case not, and also the reasons for this rapid growth in revenue. Well, my gut feeling is about they're expanding into other markets, which include the United States. Okay, then we've had a bit of a blip. I have no idea what happened 2019, but 2020 we're coming out of said blip, and things are obviously struggling a little bit for whatever reason. And then they've had a leap. That's a massive leap. Yeah. So is this suddenly, look at all this, we've got all this wonderful revenue, what should we do? Let's throw loads of money at growth. This growth can never end. And then maybe we see in the case study, if you've actually read it, that they've made redundancies, they've got rid of some of their staff, some of their infrastructure. They've had to adapt to a changing marketplace. Okay. I've not done a whole profit analysis, but when we look at the last 2 years, we can see the awful brackets, which clearly we know that means a negative operating profit. You could do a percentage difference, a change between profit and loss, add both of them together, and you can see how much that's changed. Okay, so there's a bit of a story here. However, if this continues, not great. However, if it's a matter of focusing on the growth in sales, think about Rising Star, Boston Matrix language. Maybe the reason the loss is there is because they're funding the growth and the future will be profitability. Okay, so don't go, oh my goodness, failing business, they're going to go bankrupt, because I'm a weak A level student and I like to talk about sexy bankruptcy. Think about this from the perspective of the theories we learn in the classroom. This, to me, could easily be described as a rising star. I don't know where Ben and his team want to get to with revenue. And then maybe they focus to consolidate their business and focus more on profitability in the future. But this, to me, does not look like a business that is focused on short-term profitability. I think Ben and his team want to achieve a lot more than that. I'm not saying the entrepreneur is not focused on profit. I'm saying they might be focused on even more profitability in the future, which comes from revenue growth. This, to me, looks like a rising star. Think about the strategies you would use to help sustain the growth of this rising star. And then think about where they're growing that market share. Are we talking about global market share here? Or are we talking about UK and US market share as separate entities? You can decide, but don't use generalized assertion terms, please. Okay, so, and we can see that their gross profits are around about 56%, which I thought was very low for a clothing company. But what do I know? Anyway, on to role of an entrepreneur. Now, remember I said at the beginning of this video, we're normally looking for a bit of a backstory. So where did Ben come from? Well, you know, I've literally lifted this off of Google this morning. Thank you, Google. And, you know, he developed 2 fitness applications, Fat Loss Ab Guide and iPhysique. Okay. Now, I don't know what these are. Not that I would need a fat loss guide, but he's got an understanding of the industry. He's clearly interested. He looks like he works out. So he's got this credible brand image, which is why the press are all over this every time something happens with Gymshark. I'm sure there are other companies out there that are growing and going into the US, but this seems to have taken the interest of the press, which is fine. And remember, one of those accounts was 2014. Whilst at university between 2010 and 2013. So basically, he started the company up probably whilst working at Pizza Hut, even if I could speak, earning £5 an hour. He left 6 months after launching Gymshark. Okay, that is such a key bit of information. He left 6 months. Oh, there's my key. He left 6 months after launching Gymshark. Okay, so it's not like this company suddenly sprung to life and Ben had a magic pot of money. He was still delivering pizzas. How cool is this entrepreneur story? He has definitely got the work ethic. So if we're thinking about creating and setting up a business, you know, he's got that initial creation. You know, some of the questions we've seen in the past, is setting up a business the most important entrepreneurial characteristic? Well, in the early days, when we had Pizza Hut delivery boy, yes, it was. Because if he didn't set up the business, he wouldn't be able to start the business. It's a very obvious answer. However, as the company grows, other entrepreneurial characteristics might become more important because the business is already set up. Initially, yes, it's very, very important. It is the most important factor. However, after it's set up, let's think about running and expanding the business, hey? So you've got to understand all of these characteristics, the roles of the entrepreneur, and not get them mixed up with characteristics of an entrepreneur. common mistake with this type of question, which is why they put it in exam papers all the time, is students will get them mixed up. Okay, maybe mention both of them if you get confused in the exam. Hedge your bets a little bit. Just make sure you don't over answer those 8 and 10 mark questions. Excuse me. So, running and expanding the business. This is all evidence from the case study, by the way. Yeah, this is not additional research. We can revise these 3 units from one article from the Times. Okay, so they're expanding the business. We're looking for evidence of expansion. We're looking for development of the business evidence as well. So development is new markets and physical retail spaces. I don't think he had a retail space when he's delivering his pizzas for £5 an hour, including opening stores in prominent locations and plans, further development evidence for New York and Dubai. Okay, so he's got his eye, and his team have got their eyes on the future. But when you're thinking about the role of an entrepreneur, you need to memorize the roles of an entrepreneur. You then go to the case study and you find evidence to back them up. This is not just about knowledge, unless you want to degrade in your A level. So if you just list the roles of an entrepreneur and you don't contextualize it and interpret it properly, then you're not going to get the marks. Entrepreneurship is obviously that innovation within the business. Now, if there was more information in the case study focusing on Ben's team, then I would have been talking about this as well, by the way. And obviously this is one area of the business. I'm thinking that Ben has learnt a lot over the years, but initially with this rapid growth, he would have needed the support of a team. The team isn't mentioned. In previous entrepreneurial case studies that we've seen a husband and wife team, for example. I can't remember the name of the company, but we did this in class. And the wife was then taken on as a director and she looked after all the accounts. Is that sort of thing you're looking out for in these smaller businesses? And that is really, acknowledgement that this team is working together. Now, in the article, it talks about their virgin polyester and nylon commitment to sustainability. So this is one of the things that seem to be important to this business, and I went onto their website earlier and I'll share it with you later, and it talks about some of the problems they're having sourcing some of this material, but the technology is changing and they hope to improve. In the meantime, lots of their products are made out of recycled bottles, which is an interesting thing to look into, by the way, because there's a shortage of recycled bottles because loads of clothing companies now want to improve their environmental credentials. Barriers to entrepreneurship, in lots of ways, if we go back to his initial story, I'm thinking, where's the capital come from? And clearly, early days of growing the idea, he was juggling 2 businesses, trying to persuade people. That's an entrepreneurial characteristic. Trying to persuade people to invest in Gymshark. Someone obviously did. I don't believe he grew the business from his earnings from Pizza Hut. So, personal investment, maybe family, maybe other investors, not quite sure, haven't looked into the case study that much. But also barriers to entrepreneurship in the future. This isn't just about starting a business, this is growing. Remember, this company is this rising star. Okay, so barriers to entrepreneurship, probably cash. Investment. I'm sure that I could come up with a brilliant idea this afternoon. I would think it was brilliant because maybe I'm a bit of an entrepreneur and I have that lots of self-belief, aka possible delusion. But I don't have the cash to do it because I'm only a poor Dalmatian. So you have to think about these things. Barriers to going into a new market aren't just operational challenges and a bit of Porter's 5 forces to do with competitive rivalry and all those sorts of things. It could literally be cash. Okay, so in the early days of businesses, if you look at the statistics of business startups versus failures in the first 24 months, it is a huge percentage. Go to your local high street and see how many coffee shops have opened and closed within about 2 years. Okay, they've got through the rent-free period with the landlords to entice them in. They've mortgaged as much as they dare. They've burned through their retirement savings, maybe if this was a retirement gig. And now they've closed the doors because they realise they can't really compete with the likes of Costa Coffee. Looking at Masons again on Bedford High Street, great story of reasons to stay small. They've gone from one retail premises in the local arcade in Bedford. They were there for years. They obviously had lots of loyal customers that kept coming back to them. Then a bigger shop came up on the main high street. My gut feeling is because it was empty before they went in there, they've got a really good deal on the rent. Now, maybe this is a deal in the rent to start off with. Entrepreneur spotting a gap in the market. Let's go on the high street. Maybe we'll increase sales. My gut feeling is, knowing landlords, is they've given them 3 to 5 years worth of cheaper rent, but they've locked them into maybe a 10 or a 15-year lease where it gets more expensive. The gamble of the entrepreneur is that self-belief. Will they increase their profitability enough to justify the higher rent? I hope so. The guys in Masons seem very nice. So we're thinking about risk here as well. Back onto this. Well, they've gone into the United States. They thought this was the next unicorn part of their business to help them with their increased global market share. Our rising star description again. And it's not quite worked out. So what they've done is they've closed some of their sourcing offices, and they've adjusted some of their growth trajectory. Yep. So they've anticipated some of the risks and uncertainties that are in the marketplace. Initially, they went in, they thought they were going to do better, and then they've cut back. Tough decisions. Ben and his team are running an international business. They've not just gone and said, well, we'll just stick with it. They've got limited cash reserves. Even though the business is growing at this point, they're not daft, and they've just had to adjust their business model. And maybe this is a reflection of those lower profit figures, by the way. This could be that actually that was a challenging year of trading and they've lost money in that year. They've now made the cutback. Hopefully in the future, next year's accounts, I hope for Ben and his team's sake, that we see profitability. So moving on, entrepreneurial motives and characteristics. I've accidentally left a couple up here. So we've got those characteristics and the skills required. Remember, this is in context with the case study. So I've plotted the sales figures there for you, just really so we could think about the rapid growth from down here right the way up to here. And yes, we've had a bit of a blip. However, in the future, not really sure. Maybe however in the future, maybe they plateau their sales for a couple of years. But there's a rapid growth story here. We can do percentage change from there to there, or maybe we can talk about the recent dip in sales. There's lots of things you can do with this, but we're thinking about those characteristics first of all. So I've highlighted them for you. So we've got confidence, we've got resilience, we've got adaptability and strategic planning. So it's an understanding of the industry. Most entrepreneurs don't come into an industry totally blind. They have an understanding, and we know that Ben at university developed some fitness apps. He had his own belief in the industry, and I'm sure he also worked with his business partners. There's stories online about some of his business partners exiting the business, and the reasons why. Maybe it's the right time for them. Maybe they just grew apart, these entrepreneurs, with different ideas of the business. Who knows? But you're looking for these types of things. We're looking for the reasons why they may have set up. Well, this is always broken down into financial and non-financial. And when we're thinking about reasons, and possibly characteristics, but definitely reasons, we're thinking about motivation theory. So we could get a motivational theory question. It could be, is this person focused on those intrinsic, extrinsic motivators? Is he just doing this because he wants to be successful? Is Ben and his team doing this because they just want profitability. Not everything is about profit. Okay, you need to think about that. Even though we all want enough money to survive, and the more that Ben earns, the more he gets used to it. So it could be we have that money motivation. But in the early days, when he was struggling and still having to deliver pizzas, was he really focused on his dream of being an international multimillionaire, or did it evolve over time? Was his initial motivation to launch Gymshark? Did he know where it was going to go? I don't know. Maybe there was dreams here. Maybe something happened along the journey that he suddenly thought, you know what, let's take this to the United States. So financial motives, clearly there is substantial growth using the data and interpreting the data from the case study. However, what a lovely word for a counter-argument. If only we wrote those all the time, hey? They've decided not to pay dividends for 4 consecutive years, instead focusing on growth. Let's see if this business floats on the stock market, hey? Lots of money hopefully coming into the business. If it does, this could be a should Gymshark float on the stock exchange question. This could be a moving from limited to PLC. The entrepreneur has set this up. Maybe they need loads of cash to grow this into a global brand. You can see the question coming, really linking back to our forms of business unit earlier in the revision for this year's research theme. So it could be that we're linking in entrepreneurship to forms of business. It seems an obvious type of question. However, how many times have I said that? If I keep guessing, I'm going to get it right, aren't I? So think about that. Also, if Ben only floats, I'm sure there's other shareholders, by the way, but we'll just pretend that Ben is the only shareholder. If Ben only floats 49% of the company and then gets hundreds of millions of pounds of cash that he never has to pay back, compare it to other sources of finance like bank loans, venture capital, all those sorts of stuff. He still has control over his company, so weaker A-level students won't panic about hostile takeovers and people taking away his dreams and other weak responses we see. But he's got all that money. Suddenly, what could he do? Well, he's mentioned growth into New York and Dubai in the future. Maybe these flagship stores in these centres of where there's lots and lots of money will help him to sell more for the future. Then imagine the possible opportunity cost of not floating on the stock market and using that organic, slower growth. Okay, using retained profits. Well, made a loss last year. To grow the business. Maybe someone else, Sweaty Betty, suddenly starts to grow and Gymshark start to go into decline. Okay, think about this. Really interesting. And if it's not Gymshark, it'll be another company, probably with the same sort of thing. And just be ready for a change in forms of business. It could be from sole trader to limited. That's going to be a bit of a boring question. I'm hoping we don't have that. I'm hoping we have something as exciting as Gymshark. Should they become a PLC? Linked into entrepreneurialism, it would be beautiful. Non-financial stuff. Well, here's the environmental clip from their website that I promised. He's on this journey. You might want to be this activewear major player, and he's thinking about these independents. He's clearly not delivering pizzas anymore. And, you know, it could be that he's got this vision for the industry. He could be the Anita Roddick of this industry. You know, she fundamentally changed the world of cosmetics, the first company to stop animal testing cosmetics, which had a ripple effect around the globe. An amazingly inspirational person. Maybe Ben's the next Anita. Doubt it. So, moving from entrepreneur to leader. The great thing is, well, other than me not putting the transitions in, which is probably nice in some ways. So if you think about, first of all, our small business growth, we can see that this company is now worth, depending who values it, at over £1 billion. You imagine if this suddenly goes on the stock market, if Ben and his team can sort their profitability out over the next couple of years, then there's a really good opportunity here to float on the stock market. You imagine if he sells 49% of it, you can do a quick calculation of, if it is worth £1 billion, how much money Ben and his team would have to spend on shiny new stuff, including their stores that I mentioned. So this is a massive growth opportunity, but also remember, this is in a very short period of time. Has Ben got the skills? Has his team got the skills? I mentioned the changes in directors that I noticed on their company house page. Maybe you need to surround yourself with really experienced people. I think Jeff Bezos famously said, it's not all about him. He just surrounds himself with brilliant people. I'm definitely paraphrasing there. It could be any leader, by the way, because they don't do it all on their own, do they? Even the Elon Musks of this world don't do it all on their own. Tried really, and it didn't work, did it? So, risks of overtrading, again, it's in another part of the curriculum. In this industry and with this research theme, we've done a lot. I've spoken a lot about overtrading already at the beginning of this video and in other videos. You can go back to that. So the difficulties are really when you're focusing on those skills. Okay, so we've got a mention of the new board members, industry veterans. Very interesting term there. Yeah, so it's a step towards the entrepreneur to a leader capable of managing large growing business. Very important that Ben and his team develop the skills or have the skills to go to the next level. In a previous video, I reflected on one of my line managers in Phones for You who took the company so far, and then the board of directors said, we need someone else. And they brought someone in who was experienced in running a much larger retail company. And it worked for a while. Gymshark are going through the same sort of rapid growth. If this is a rapid growth case study, you need to think of the word rapid and think about cash flow, overtrading, diseconomies of scale, possibly going from a localized UK supply chain to a global supply chain, including possibly Dubai and the United States. Okay, so don't generalize over that. Look for evidence. But we've got some evidence here of how it might be less difficult to move from an entrepreneur to a leader because Ben has surrounded himself with industry veterans. Beautiful, beautiful piece of evidence. That's it for that one.